Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 250 of Dial the Gate. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's like, oh, really? Is that possible? But it is. My name is David Reed. Thank you so much for being with me for this episode. Joseph Mallozzi is going to be joining us for his 15th or 16th show, part 15 of him. He joined us for with him and his writing partner Paul Mully. I have some news for everyone, and that news is that lining up with 250, I guess there's something appropriate. San Diego Comic-Con just notified me that my panel for this summer has been approved, and so I am privileged to announce that Dial the Gate is going to be presenting a 30th anniversary fan celebration surrounding the Stargate feature film at San Diego Comic-Con 2024. The specific date and times have yet to be announced. I have an idea, but they're like, hold off because some things may change. We will have special guests and we will have some door prizes. And if you can't make it to San Diego, we will be recording the event and it will be presented on YouTube pretty much exactly 1 week after the panel itself from San Diego. So I am beyond privileged that they have allotted us this, and according to the room information that I've been given, it's a pretty tall order in terms of the number of seats. So, but that could easily change. So I'm very thankful. In the meantime, I am privileged to welcome back Joseph Mallozzi, writer and executive producer of Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, Stargate Universe. Joe, thank you once again for being here. And it really means a lot to have you for 250. So
happy anniversary.
Thank you. Am I right?
Huge milestone, 250.
I know.
Wow. So you're gonna beat the Stargate episode
at some point
run.
here. I think I may have beaten it in terms of overall hours.
Okay.
But I have to sit down and check. But yeah, we're in the neighborhood for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How did you feel when SG-1 got to 200? What was that reaction like? Did you ever keep up track of your individual episodes so that you knew like when you and Paul had written 100 episodes?
No, we never did because it was such a machine. I mean, I felt like we were constantly writing, or really constantly. When I say constantly writing, I mean physically sitting down and writing, but also just constantly thinking of ideas for episodes or running through the dialogue in our heads. That we really didn't have time to stop and take stock. Although, I mean, the production took stock for us. I remember we had the 200th anniversary party.
Yeah.
What episode was that? What was our 200th episode?
The 200th episode itself? It was
yeah,
Company of Thieves.
I guess. Right.
Was it Company of Thieves? No, I'm thinking of the 200th episode of production.
Yeah,
with Atlantis. That's a great question. Did anyone in the chat pull that out? Because I remember you guys had a party for Wormhole Extreme. There was a party for 200, and I think was that the one where Guinness showed up and said that Company of Thieves had beaten the record for longest running sci-fi series.
So I think the two things I remember about the 200th episode party, I believe that was a party, was there was a chocolate fountain. And
I wonder whose idea that was.
Yeah, it wasn't my idea. I was
really
surprised. There was a chocolate fountain, and the studio announced our cancellation. So it was, memorable for all sorts of reasons.
Jeez. My understanding was that the episode the episode aired and then we found out the following Monday. So you guys had that information for going into the back half of the season. Wow, man. Well, at least you got
which was, I mean, it's always bittersweet to be canceled, but it was really the best case scenario in that, unlike Atlantis or Universe, we were afforded the opportunity to write a series finale, which Robert Cooper did with Unending.
That makes it bittersweet. Otherwise, it just would have been bitter. Like when you've run out of railroad track to put down and you have no more room to put any more,
Yeah.
part of you is like, okay, what can we do in editing? And so many
Yeah.
shows are like that. Quantum Leap was like that. The original,
Mhm.
it's like, how can we button this up knowing that we're not
Mhm.
coming back? So
Yeah.
you guys did have an embarrassment of riches, to be sure.
Mhm.
So I wanted to check in with you about, the obligatory. Have you heard anything about another Stargate? Anything that's
Oh,
going on? So yeah,
what have you heard? What have you heard? I'm all ears.
a lot of people have been reporting different things,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of if it is to be all considered factual,
Mhm.
uh, it seems like they have some kind of an idea of what they want, but
Mhm.
they're tepid on when to execute it, and so they plan to do something and then they pull it back. I've heard
Mhm.
everything from a movie to a TV show to a movie and a TV show,
That's exactly, I heard
and
the
it's
exact same.
but the problem is the rumors just, even if they are fact, they're churning and churning behind the scenes. So at a certain point, I don't want to know until they've just picked something, because you
Yeah.
and I, we've gone through this for years watching
Yeah.
Stargate, decide what. So at a certain point, it's like, just figure it out, make it concrete, and then when Gateworld posts something, I'll carry it, because then I know it's for sure. It's not so
Right.
much whether I want to believe it or not.
Right.
They're trying to figure out what they want. And, like so many people in our lives, you don't know what
Mhm.
you want. So
Right. Right.
it's such a big tapestry. There's
Yeah.
so much to choose
If,
from.
I mean, you're right. I mean, nobody knows what they want. They could, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but basically go with what worked in the past.
Right.
But everyone likes the newer, shinier thing.
Well, yeah, because it has lens flares.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm. Right.
we had Paul Mully, and his opinion was reset, do something new. And at first I was like, huh? And then
Mhm.
the more I thought about it, I was like, would it be so bad as long as it didn't? I think a lot of the audience has this mindset of, well, what I've seen, what I love is official, and
Mhm.
anything else would delegitimize what came before. Is that a fair
Mhm.
mindset, or is that just taking it too far?
You know, just between us. So,
And
a
our
lot of
70 closest
ideas,
friends.
yeah, and everybody watching, a lot of ideas were kind of bandied about, what between when the show was canceled and today, I guess in terms of what kind of a creative spin the, new series would take. And one that was suggested was this idea that um, you cross you kind of use what has been established, universe that has been established, to start a new story. So in this other version, it would be like one of our characters, like maybe either Colonel O'Neill or Daniel Jackson, uh, travels to another reality because their original reality has been destroyed, and helps them uncover the gate. And and so basically it would start kind of a new story and kind of an alternate reality. But the thing that kind of bugs me about that is kind of the problem that I think a lot of fans had with a more it was a Morpheus too. The idea
Mm,
that you're leaving behind the reality that we have already established, fallen in love with, in some cases destroy it to start
mm,
a new story,
mm-hmm.
which I don't think a lot of fans would be on board with, certainly not the established fandom. And I think it would just unnecessarily complicate things for new fans as well. So I mean, I can see the allure
Mm.
of starting fresh, but I mean, you're always walking that fine line between obviously welcoming in new fans in a way that uh, doesn't overly complicate things, but at the same time, not pissing off the established fan base. Because, if you turn off the established fan base, there will be problems for you down the line, I guarantee.
Yeah. And I have a couple of follow-ups to that.
Yeah.
It's been a while since we caught up. Did you see season 3 of Picard?
I have not seen season one of Picard. I have not seen any Star Trek
Oh,
since, let's see, Voyager.
okay.
So,
So you effectively turned it off.
I guess so. It's just like the Star Wars shows. I mean, they're all different in many ways. Some I hear Andor is fantastic, but personally, I got off the Star Wars bandwagon halfway through Return of the Jedi when the Ewoks trotted out
Okay.
onto the screen, and I was like, "What is going on?" And then George Lucas was like, "Oh, this is always, tonally what I was going for." And I was like,
Got it.
"Really? Did you watch Empire Strikes Back?" And I was soured on the franchise. So basically, I kind of reflect a lot of, I see a lot of, kind of response of some longtime Star Wars fans and or Star Trek fans to the contemporary reworkings of, the shows they grew up with. And for me, Star Wars just took a 180-degree turn
Mm.
halfway through Return of the Jedi and just kind of lost me.
Yucha.
Not to say that none of these the shows are fantastic, but it's like the Star Trek shows, the Star Wars shows, any of the Marvel shows. I mean, I love Marvel comics, but I kind of had to tap out at the movies, uh, with the exception of Deadpool, which is,
Right.
I think an outlier. Uh,
It's
but
its own thing.
yeah, for me, they just reach critical mass to the point where I just can't. It's just too much for me.
Well,
For me.
to be fair,
Mhm.
I see absolutely what you're saying about the Ewoks, and I have a lot of feelings about that, especially when it came to Return of the Jedi, where the series, that film kind of took an unexpectedly less serious turn at a really inopportune time.
Mm.
So I see where you're coming from. But season 3 of Picard received critical acclaim, and the fans loved it as well. And it's, I think, really wet the whistle of everyone who was wanting a true TNG reunion, where they got them all around that table and pulled it off. And I honestly
Mhm.
think that something can be true for Stargate, where they can bring in um, new characters and new stories, but also
Yeah,
acknowledge who came before. So I think that they
absolutely.
can
That's the
make it
best of
work.
both worlds. Best of both worlds. They can do it. It
Yep.
is possible. And also, I mean, a lot of what made Stargate, especially when I think of SG-1 and Atlantis, so great and so successful, uh, was thematically this idea of kind of this found family, whether SG-1 or the Atlantis expedition or even, the Destiny crew. And also tonally, again, I think to SG-1 and Atlantis, kind of a fun sci-fi, action adventure, exploration, attitude that I find kind of sorely lacking in a lot of contemporary sci-fi. And one of the things that kind of worries me about new Amazon doing new Stargate is the idea that it's going to be less Stargate and more just like some other kind of dark sci-fi series that just will just feel like more of the same and no longer kind of the special, franchise that fans kind of fell in love with.
I think that Stargate can do darker like Universe did tonally,
Mm.
but it
Hmm.
cannot lose its spirit. It cannot lose its humor and its recognition of its place in the pantheon of all of these, kind of genre shows out there.
Hmm.
When Rick is on screen, he's kind of winking at you several
Yep.
times throughout the series.
Hmm.
He is
Hmm.
Jaffa. No, but he plays one on TV. I mean,
Right.
come on. And it like so much of that show, Rick and you guys behind the scenes working in conjunction with the lead set the
Hmm.
tone.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the reason that 17 seasons of the show were so successful. As long as it has that, you can
Hmm.
do all kinds of storytelling that sci-fi has open for you.
Yeah. I agree.
So the industry has also been doing a little bit of a contraction as well. And I wanted to know how business is going up in Canada. There's a lot of people very concerned in LA. And I've spoken with several past contributors on Dial the Gate who are like, yeah, I'm working, or I'm working right now, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to be. There's some concerns there. How are things looking from your neck of the woods?
Well, I will have to say that for many, many years, with the proliferation of streaming, this talk of peak TV,
Mm.
it was really evident that it was, unsustainable, and it would reach that point where things would contract, and it took like the strike and potential recession. Are we in recession? Are we in recession? For it to basically kick off, and that's where we are now. In Canada, I think things have always been dire. I'll be absolutely honest. It just, the Canadian industry has always been in kind of dire straits. And I mean, I think they're like the same 24 writers work on every, they just go from, show to show. But for the most part, it's, the Canadian industry is incredibly, incredibly tough. I mean, I look at my show, Dark Matter, or Brad Wright's Travelers. Those were outliers in that, we went out, we created the shows, we went out, we sold them in the US, we sold them internationally, and then, came back and Canada sort of, was kind of a final piece of the puzzle. It's not a situation where you can actually go to a Canadian broadcaster, or rarely go to a Canadian broadcaster and sell a show, unless, you're a former network executive, you're related to a network executive, or, so it's tough. It's kind of the same way, obviously, in the US, it's all about connections as well. But I'm hearing, more and more, it's becoming increasingly difficult to get those green lights, even with packaging. But packaging, I mean, you bring on, an established director, or sometimes you bring in an established star. And in the past, that would kind of cement a sale, but that's no longer the case now. So, it's uneasy times, everywhere. And it'll be interesting to see how things develop. I know, certain streamers would be spending ridiculous amounts of money on productions and not, getting back a reasonable return on their investments. And it just reached the point where they realized, like, this doesn't make any business sense. We've got to find a way to cut costs. And now they're going to the other extreme, where
Right.
they're, really cutting costs and looking for ways to, to produce content that, at a very, very low price point.
Can I ask you a dark matter question?
Yeah,
Right, dark matter.
absolutely, of course.
In terms of selling the series,
Yeah.
how much of because it was a live action adaptation, how much of the original comic was a springboard for you? How was it different?
I mean, it was all a
other...
springboard. I mean, the way Dark Matter happened is I had the pilot, and I started my career in animation development, and I would always bring in projects and some of the most amazing original content. And my bosses were never interested, but I would bring in the most derivative IP, intellectual properties, books, or whatever, and they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, we got to do this again." It's because it's an established property, and they think, "Oh, there's a built-in audience." So what I decided to do was, because I was a big fan of the comic books, is I decided to pitch it as a comic book, and I took it to Dark Horse, and I was like, "Hey, look, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to turn my series into a comic book," with the thinking that, I could tell this. I've always been a big fan of comic book. I could tell my story in comic book, and if I sold it as a series, bonus. And I ended up selling it as a series, and so, I had turned the first 2 episodes into a 4-issue opening arc of the comic book, and then they ended up commissioning the pilot. So I just went, back to the drawer and took out the original pilot and handed that in. So, I mean, it very much came out of my idea for this, series that frankly, I, just was kind of spinning in my head for almost, I want to say like 6 or 7 years while I was working on Atlantis.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how many, so I wasn't familiar, I wasn't completely sure with how many comics had been released. So 4 had been released.
Yeah, 4 issues. Wow. It was an
Wow.
opening arc, and that's really all Dark Horse wanted to do. I was kind of disappointed because I went back to them after the show was canceled in the hopes of continuing the series, but they were kind of not really interested. So
that would have been the way to do it, man.
yeah,
I mean, because
yeah.
you would have already had the look and everything already figured out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I think one of the reasons they kind of bumped on it is because while we could have continued the original series as envisioned before the series, I would have really wanted to tell the story that would pick up after the TV series. But in order to do that, we would have had to use the likenesses of the cast.
Right.
And once you get into that, then you get into, issues.
Contracts. So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Any movement on the front of continuing that
story? I'm at the point now where I think, creatively, I could very well do it. I have a storyline that picks up like 10 years after the events of the season 3 finale, and hopefully ties most of everything up in a miniseries. But I think what I would really need to do is get another show off the ground and use the heat off that show to set up a Dark Matter series. So that's what's in the works now.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
Are conversations being had?
Conversations are being had about, I think, a half dozen different pilots and scripts that I have out there. Again, I mean, it's, in this business, it's always a crapshoot. You never know what's going to get greenlit, and it's always what you least expect, and sometimes, the one that you least want to do. So I don't know. We'll see.
It's like a job interview. It's like, I got that one. I didn't even try for that one.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy because and things just like happen and then go away. There was like a show that I just signed a contract for. We're going to basically shoot this summer in Portugal, and then things kind of went dark. And then suddenly I'll get, my agent will reach out and is like, hey, remember that Christmas movie you wrote 15 years ago? Well, CBS is interested, and if you can send us a copy of the script. And
so be open for everything.
Exactly.
Expect the unexpected.
Yes.
You guys spent so many years together in that writer's room. What were some of the more grueling days in production? From SG-1, Atlantis, Universe, what were some of the longest days?
I think back to kind of spinning stories. I mean, really, that's where it really came down to. The longest days always came down to trying to crack the stories, coming up with a premise and kind of things not working, and going back to the drawing boards. And I remember just the ones that stand out for me are sort of my scripts. So I will always remember Ripple Effect. Was one story that we broke more or less in the room, but the one twist we couldn't get was, if you remember Ripple Effect, it was the gate starts, there's the classic tear in space time that ends up depositing various alternate versions of SG-1 into our reality. And there was one version, of SG-1 that essentially came to our universe or reality in order to I think, were they going to steal?
They were stealing a ZPM to fight the Ori from Atlantis.
Yeah, and so there was a point where we end up trapped. The good guys end up trapped, and the bad guys take over the ship. And I was like, how do they turn the tables? I needed to turn the tables in a way that, hopefully was very clever and just, surprise the audience, and thematically work within the context of the story, of this idea of, they're always thinking one step ahead of us, and we, and so we have to think 2 steps ahead of them because they are us. And I remember I spent like 3 or 4 days trying to come up with that twist, and it didn't come to me. And I'm like, you know what? I'll figure it out in the outline stage. And sometimes that happens where you can't really figure it out in the room, but you don't want to waste any more time. So you're like, let me sit with it, and I'll come up with something. And so I worked on the outline, and I worked on the outline for 2 weeks, and I still didn't come up with anything. I didn't know what that twist was. It's like, maybe I'll find it in the script. And I wrote the script, and I don't know what happened, but magically it came to me, and I came up with that twist, and it was just kind of a magical moment, a huge magical moment of relief. So that was one. The other one was an episode called This Mortal Coil, Stargate Atlantis. And that one was, I don't know how much of it we broke in the room, but that one was kind of very tough, I think, at the script stage, just because there were so many moving parts. And again, it had to do with an alternate version of our crew. And one of the things that I think I was always criticized for was I would always take the audience's intelligence for granted, meaning I always assumed the audience, being sci-fi audience and being fans of the show, were savvy and smart. They were sci-fi savvy, they were smart, and they would be able to figure things out, so I wouldn't have to explain everything to them. And as was pointed out to me, no, I should make things more obvious. I needed to make things more obvious. That's a note I would always get from the network as well. So that script was a struggle for me, because I think I must have gone through like 4 or 5 drafts. And I remember, I think after the 4th draft, the writers kind of solemnly walking into my office, and a downcast Carl Binder's like, still a little bumpy. And I was like, and the look on my face, I'm sure, told it all. But in the end, I thought that episode actually turned out okay. Although I think the cast and director, Andy, hated it. Yes.
When it's interesting that you bring up ripple effect, because oftentimes when I meet people, and they ask me what I do, I tell them I work on this podcast for a franchise called Stargate, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's the one with Kurt Russell and MacGyver." I said, "Yeah." And one of the thing, and I talked with Rob Cooper about this fairly extensively a few episodes ago, and a big thing about the audiences who are not familiar with the show or who have gotten into it is, what is it that the Stargate does? Is it a dimensional device? Is it a time device? A lot of people are like, well, when is this set? No, you're crossing space, not necessarily time. Yeah. So part of it was Robert was like, at the beginning of the show, they were trying to figure out, to make sure to establish the rules of what it could and could not do. Yeah. And so they added the time travel feature in season 2. But by season 9, to add a dimensional paradigm to the device, was part of you guys like, should we even do this? Is this muddying the water a little bit of what this thing can do, given the properties that are thrown at it?
We had essentially done these types of stories, these AU types of stories, through other means. Was it the quantum mirror, for instance? So, I mean, using the gate seemed to be the most obvious. It's
the quantum mirror
like any aspect of the show. I mean, you establish the base, the mythology, and then you play within that sandbox. Yeah. So in my mind, it was just kind of a variation, on a theme, on an established theme.
That's true. But also at the same time, you have to assign more dialogue to hang lanterns on things. What about the entropic cascade failure? Why isn't that happening? Well, these are closer to reality. Why is it just SG-1? Well, they're the frontline unit, so there's a lot more.
And I was aware of that, which, and kind of addressed all of that within the script. But I mean, one of the things you have to be cognizant of when you write those scripts very early on is when you create something like entropic cascade failure, you're severely limiting yourself down the line.
Right.
So things like a Zat, well, one shot, one Zat shot, knocks you unconscious, 2 shots kill you, 3 shots disintegrates you, and also opens locks. And then, 2 seasons later, it's like, why don't they just pick the lock with the Zat? And it's like,
Oh, gosh, absolutely.
think about what you're doing, guys.
No, absolutely. And if something disintegrates, how much of what it's attached to disintegrates? The clothes disintegrate. I mean, there are all these little,
Yeah.
You want to
It's
remain
being out
faithful
of
to the
phase.
content. Oh
Yeah,
my
it's being
God.
out of phase.
Yeah, but their feet still make contact.
Right.
That's one of my favorite lines from Wormhole Extremists. Why don't I fall through the floor? And they're all just standing there like, yeah, it's a big
Because
problem.
we've had those conversations. We've all been there, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
What episodes flew off the page? You broke them
Oh,
down.
this is
They were
crazy
no
because this
problem.
was not even my episode, but the one that flew off the page that essentially I broke in the room. I had like all the ideas for, and then Martin Garrett went off and wrote it. Was Harmony.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it's a classic Joseph Mallozzi kind of script, and I was kind of envious of Martin because it was kind of fun and kind of the spoiled brat and all the twists and turns and everything, and I was, it was just Martin, Carl, and I in the room, and I mean, the 3 of us broke it, but like, I remember coming up with almost, all like the major beats for that one, and kind of wish I had written it, but Martin did like a fantastic job nevertheless. But that was one that really flew for me, just because it was kind of in the groove, and those kind of funnier episodes I always enjoyed, more.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, just thinking of another one, you'll have to ask Rob Cooper for this. On the other side, one that we didn't, crack in the room was Stargate Universe's Time, which is probably one of my favorite episodes in the franchise.
Agreed.
For the ending. And I remember him coming into the room. He didn't have the ending. He's like, this is kind of what I want to do, or where I want to get to, but I'm not sure how to get there. And we're like, I don't know. And then he went home and figured it out and came up with an ending that has frustrated and baffled many a fan, and yet at the same time, I think it's quite brilliant.
No, if you think, well, I love that he hangs it on Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Yeah.
The trick is the secret is in the story there, and I remember sitting at home watching it and be like, "That's it?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
It's like the Sopranos ending, right?
Right?
Oh, is that what they're gonna do?
Yeah.
Huh.
But the more I thought about it, it's like, yeah, you really do have all the information. Yeah, it's the second of 3 iterations.
Yeah.
And I really wish that the Kino episodes had not put a button on that at the end.
Yeah.
But I get I don't know whose decision that was. I get why it was done. Hey, we found this Kino and this happened, and oh my God, they looked like they had a shitty time, and it's still a heck of a story.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Absolutely.
The Harmony, that's one of those where that may fly off the page, and in terms of blocking and the story and everything else. But if you don't cast correctly, you're sunk.
And we cast perfectly a 13-year-old Jodelle Ferland, who, as I'm fond of telling everyone, knew all her lines, knew David and Joe's lines. So if ever they would flub their lines, she would remind them in a very cute way. And she was so great that I just remembered her, and for Dark Matter, I thought she would be perfect for 5, and she absolutely was.
I've been wanting to get her on the show. She hasn't responded to our messages.
She keeps a very low profile.
I understand.
She does not. She's actually quite shy. Surprisingly shy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, she's good. And it was a great twist on an idea where when you hear this whiny 13-year-old kid, you're thinking of a whiny 13-year-old kid from Earth, but this one has actually had an upbringing where she's actually pretty resourced.
Yes.
And it keeps on surprising the guys. It's like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, she has been trained.
Yeah.
So that's really fun. Oh man, I've got some fan questions here for you,
Great.
and some of these may be repeats from previous
Sure.
conversations.
Yeah.
But I really, it's been a while, so I wanted to catch up with you mainly. Ginger's mom, who was your favorite character to write dialogue for?
To write dialogue for, I mean, obviously Jack O'Neill,
Mm,
was quippy and always fun to write for. As a villain, Ball, Cliff Simon was
mm.
brilliant, and he was just such a wonderfully stylish villain. I was always been a big fan of supervillains, so very much enjoyed writing for him. And then I would probably say Woolsey,
Yeah.
just because again, Bob Picardo is brilliant, and he's a character who um, displays vulnerability through unintentional humor, I guess, in his character. And he was just a character that I loved writing for because I loved, I guess, redeeming him in the eyes of the audience over the course of, the first episode he appeared in to the last. You really grew to love the guy,
We understood where
or
he's
go
coming
from like
from,
disliking the guy to actually liking the guy.
and he's a dog lover.
Yes,
So,
yes, I had to write that in as well. Yes, very important.
did you see the film American Fiction?
I have not.
Oh, this is a great movie. Jeffrey Wright, John Ortiz, Erica Alexander. Um, the tagline: a novelist who's fed up with the establishment profiting from black entertainment uses a pen name to write a book that propels him into the heart of hypocrisy and madness he claims to disdain. It's a great story. You would love it. The one of the scenes in it is him writing the one of the scenes, and he's in the room with the characters, and the characters are talking, and at a certain point they stop and they turn to the writer and they're like, that doesn't make sense, I wouldn't say that. I'm curious to know, and I've had this conversation with a couple of other writers on the show, including, like, for instance, Harley Jane Kozak, who has written some novels. How much what is going on in your brain while you're writing is similar to that? Do the characters ever talk with you to work out a problem? Do you ever encounter them going, no, I'm not going to do that, or some version of that where you're just saying to yourself, I actually don't see them saying that given this circumstance? Has there ever been pushback from an inner monologue?
Yeah, I mean, all the time, to be honest with you, because when you're writing dialogue, you're juggling several things. One of which is, I mean, what is the point of the scene? What is the information you're trying to convey? The second thing is, how does the dialogue unfurl in a natural way? I mean, basically, when you talk, it's like a ping pong match, right? You're going back and forth. You're not just delivering exposition, hopefully. It has to sound very natural. What you say segues into what she says, segues into what you say. So you have to find the rhythm, and at the same time, you need it to sound like the voice of these very distinct characters. So very much, it's like I said, it's a juggling match. You're always, I find that, the dialogue is really, I mean, the dialogue really is the writing process once you've got like the structure down. And you really, for me, it always comes down to whether I'm in the shower, whether, I'm driving, whether I'm out for a walk with my dog.
Not thinking about it.
Thinking about it constantly.
Okay, fine. But
Yes.
occupying yourself with other tasks.
Well, actually, for some reason, I do my best writing when I'm occupied with other tasks rather than just sitting behind a laptop. So
Right.
I'll run the dialogue in my head, and the first two lines, the first three lines, that exchange, then go back and rewrite it in my head, rewrite it in my head, rewrite it in my head until I have more or less the scene. At that point, I will sit down and actually write it out and fine tune it and ensure that, as I said, it delivers the information that I needed to deliver. It does so in a conversational manner, and the voices are true. So, I mean, you're constantly doing that.
Josh Blue wants to know, um, Amazon gives you the green light to do the next Stargate. Would Earth be significantly more advanced at this point behind the scenes based on the Asgardian ancient knowledge and technology? What would be the biggest change you think 20 years on? Would Destiny have come home? And we can't
No,
pick
Destiny would no.
the
I
lock
mean,
on her
I
knowledge.
wouldn't. I don't love the idea of skipping too far
Yeah.
ahead and having a lot of the story that fans have looked forward to throughout the franchise kind of essentially told off screen. Like, oh, by the way, the Stargate program was revealed, or Destiny came back, and that issue was resolved. Also one of the things that made Stargate, certainly SG-1, so beloved was the fact that, unlike a lot of shows that were set in the far future, it was set in the here and now. It was set in contemporary times. So, I think it also allowed viewers at home to better connect with, these very grounded characters. So, if I was going to do new Stargate, I would do very much that, what we established in SG-1, in obviously a different way, that's like a gamma base, or I'm not sure what kind of a premise a new show would have, but I'd keep it contemporary characters, certainly. And I, and keep it as close to the real world of today as possible.
How far away do you think the characters as we know them in that world would be from making their own gate network and building their own Stargates? Because that's one of the things that I've always wanted to see.
Sorry, who?
The show, the characters as we knew them, the reality that you guys created. How far off do you think they were from building their own Stargate network? Or was that not?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, it's not something that we really toyed with the exception of the idea of the Midway station, where essentially we did kind of do that, kind of joining the that network of Pegasus gates and Milky Way gates to create almost or very
we were adapting the technology, for sure.
Yeah.
And then you blew it to hell.
Yes.
Which made sense after a while. The thing, one of the genius things that I loved and I love the nuts and bolts of why the things work the way they do, where's the ZPM factory hidden on Atlantis, things like that. One of the things that I loved about Universe was the seed ships. And I think that it would make sense that there was at least one Milky Way seed ship, that was manufacturing these. If they were doing it then with that iteration, they'd be doing it now. And is this thing still around? Is it hiding in an asteroid somewhere? Being able to harness that vessel, if it does exist, a Goa'uld or whoever who was wanting to, dominate and enslave a series of worlds. That would be a way to do it. Do you think the Milky Way had a seed ship or a series of them based on the mythology that you guys created later? Where were these things constructed otherwise?
I want to say theoretically possible. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul Brickler, one of the things that I deeply appreciate about Stargate is your attention to detail about the mythology. Every time I hear some obscure name, I go research and find some ancient tale from Babylon or China, and it's a lot of fun and usually on point. How much time did you guys spend researching ancient mythology as writers and producers to springboard into your stories?
Well, it was really story dependent, obviously. And obviously the idea being that these iterations of these gods and goddesses, while they were certainly grounded in that mythology, so the idea being that they would take on the persona of these gods rather than they were those gods
from history
that were revered at the time. So, I mean, you could, you did your research, but bearing in mind that these were not the originals. These were essentially
the Goa'uld's interpretation.
Yes, of them. So basically, you had creative leeway in terms of what they could and couldn't do, and the kind of their respective pasts.
Charlene Anderson, I'm interested if you have a comment for this. You may not. You may be like, everything, worked. Did you ever write a scene that after it was shot and edited and finalized, you were like, it's not what I envisioned. It's okay. It's, it gets the job done.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it happens a lot.
Okay.
I mean, there were always like those episodes where you look back and you're like, you know what? I wish I had done this differently, or had written that differently, or this one would have come out, differently. Honestly, too numerous to mention. I mean, to be honest, it's tough for me to rewatch some of my work.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's the same for, I've seen like actors say the same thing where they won't watch their show. I mean, I will end up, obviously, I'm so close to the script, and then it goes off, and then I'm watching the dailies, and then I'm watching the editor's assembly, then I'm watching the director's cut, and then I'm in there and rewatching and editing, and then you have to go into the mix. By that point, you are done with the episode. Even if you enjoy it, you're kind of sick of it. But more often than not, there's always something that bugs you about it.
Mm-hmm.
And having to see it time and again, it just reaches a point where you're like, you know what? I think I've seen enough of this episode, or, so absolutely, you're your own worst critic. And no episode is perfect.
The other thing that I've had an interesting time talking with, for instance, David Hewlett about, and we've talked about it a little bit, is cultural perception as we move forward. And what jokes landed then do not work now.
Right.
Alternate McKay grabs alternate Sam's ass in Mobius, and it's played for laughs.
Right.
Whereas now, I don't even think you guys would have shot that.
Correct.
Or if you did, Sam would have responded accordingly. There's certain things that are of the time in which they were made.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You can't anticipate how culture is going to receive something 50 years down the line. God knows what we have right now that we take for granted that they're going to look at with their values and say, that is not acceptable. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings to mind like that 200th episode where Invisible O'Neill, and even though I wrote the sequence, I did not write the sequence where he's in the shower.
Right.
And that was pitched in the room, and I'm like, guys, this is really creepy. We're like, it's funny. So I don't know. And it's funny because, after it aired, the fans were like, this is funny. This is great. I love this sequence. I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's fair. Absolutely. I am amazed in the fact I have some friends who are really staunchly like anti, how do I want to put this? The characteristics that Rodney embodies, they don't appreciate in other men, but they love him and it's like, what's going on here? And I think part of it is that they know his spirit, and they know what he's trying to, and they know how, like, damaged is that a word? They know how dysfunctional he is, and they give him some rope.
Really, what you say, they know him. So over the course of, I don't know how many episodes, they know him and are willing to sort of excuse or overlook some behavior because they know him at his core as an individual. Whereas, essentially nowadays, especially online, you're just reading about, someone's reactions or someone's actions, and you are reacting to that news without the fuller context of this individual. And I mean, let's face it, like a lot of the times, no matter what this person or what kind of person is, their actions are reprehensible. But then there are other times where, I mean, context would potentially change your opinion of someone.
Yeah. Yay, Vader is saved. He went to the light at the end. He killed 50 billion people. So what? So what? I think for McKay in particular, had it not been for Redemption 1 and 2, I can imagine, let's skip Redemption 1 and 2 from happening and go to, okay, so we're going to replace this character with Rodney McKay. I'm sure it would have been like, guys, this guy's a jerk. You know, this won't work unless we have a redemption.
That was my reaction. That was my reaction. Rob pitched out bringing on Rodney McKay, and I was like, what? This really? I mean, I love David Hewlett, but I didn't know. I think that was going to work. And Rob and Brad proved me wrong.
If you give a character
and David Hewlett to a certain extent,
well, and Richard Woolsey and Picardo.
Yeah,
you make him a dog lover. That's one huge bonus,
right? Yes,
but you also show humanity for a character, and leveraging the actor's performance can make all the difference.
Yeah.
And isn't it nice to prove, if not the audience, your own biases wrong every now and then?
Yes.
So there's something that feels good about that. It's like, oh yeah, I can, allow people to grow in my perception of them.
Right.
So, if you could show one Stargate episode to a new fan that was created by someone else's, one of the other writers, which would you pick? Ian wanted to know this. He wanted to know what your favorite episode was to make, but I'm more interested in the other answer.
I mean, I go back to Time.
Yeah.
SU's Time. That is one of my favorite episodes, just because it's really tough to do time travel. I mean, a lot of shows do time travel, and in the end, if you got to squint for it to make sense, not all the time, but a lot of the time. And I thought Time was like very clever. For SG1, I always was a fan of 2010. Brad Wright. Just a classic AU storyline with a very somber ending, which I quite loved. So those are the two that I would show them.
Absolutely. No, I completely see that. Let me see here. Jack's Cabin. Is it your opinion that dark matter and Stargate share the same reality?
They do not share the same reality in my mind.
Okay.
Because if they did, then in the dark matter universe, we would have undoubtedly have come by across some from Stargates. Although in my mind, it would have been possible to have the franchises cross over, which was the plan. Actually, I was in talks with MGM shortly after Dark Matter was canceled about doing a potential crossover
of realities
miniseries. Yes, wow. Using the Blink drive, the Dark Matter Blink drive, and did have some preliminary conversations about that, but sadly, as happens in this business, it all went away.
Wow. Well, you never know. You keep those ideas in the back of your head. So, because comic books, a lot of the Star Trek comics that have come out recently, Harlan Ellison got to adapt his City on the Edge of Forever. So you never know.
Right.
So, Fabius, what is your view of AI on story generation? You and I haven't talked about the development in AI recently. How you feeling?
Yeah. To be honest with you, it's tough for me to answer because I really don't have a concept of where AI sits at the moment. I mean, certainly, in the worst case scenario, the AI, they get rid of writers and artists, and they just have AIs generate everything, which obviously would be very bad for all concerned. But I don't see AI getting there anytime soon, especially, I keep on bringing it back to humor. There's a nuance of humor that I don't think AI is able to achieve, but certainly not yet. Could AI deliver a average film script or series script, kind of auto generate something like that? I'm sure it could.
Probably
would
look
it be
like
very
Sharknado
good?
or Frankenfish.
Yeah,
or sci-fi movie of the weeks.
Yeah, at this point, I don't think it would be very good.
Yeah,
but I think really what I've been saying all along is, I mean, we all have to worry, but the ones who really have to worry are these studios and the studio executives who basically think that, oh, so the artist or the writer will become unnecessary part of the process. It's like, actually, no. If AI becomes a tool that people are going to use, it's a tool that that writers or artists will be able to ultimately use to cut out the middleman. The middleman being the studio and the studio's executives. We'll be able to hopefully, reach a point where we'll be able to create our own content and deliver it directly to audiences without the need for a studio to put all, to green light it or say okay or distribute it for us. So really, they're the ones who should be worried.
Yeah, when you've got things like Tubi, Pluto TV, you've got I forget the studio that's always punching out all these documentaries, but I mean, if someone likes it, there's money for them to come and grab it,
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think that that's an amazing thing, coming for the future.
Yep.
I have a final question for you. You got a couple minutes?
Absolutely.
I talked with Brad years ago, and I asked him about the Stargate Atlantis canceled film, and I said, "Will this conclude the Wraith?" And he said, "This would not have been a conclusion; it would have been an expansion." Can you elaborate even just a nugget on what he meant by that?
I'm not even sure. I mean, essentially, it would have seen it was a time travel, a story that would have seen Atlantis leave Earth, ended up in another galaxy en route to Pegasus, and encounter a civilization where that turns out to be they meet a distant descendant of Tela. Essentially, the Atlantis story became really the seed of the premise for common descent in Stargate universe. Yeah,
got it.
And it was a lot of fun because I always loved the Todd characters, and as I said, I'm always big on redemption.
Of course.
And our Todd becomes this unlikely ally in Atlantis's bid to sort of escape and return to Pegasus. And at the end, Todd and John actually shake hands, which is kind of very symbolic, and achieve an understanding. So I guess in that respect, yeah, I mean, basically, there's an evolution to that relationship, and what would have come of that. I mean, I don't really know, but it certainly would have changed the established quote with certain respect.
Could the Wraith live without feeding on humans?
That'd be a toughie. That'd be a toughie. Could you go without burgers?
Me personally, no.
Yes.
But I mean, some point between the production of Tritonin in season 6 of SG1 and season 10, where it's beaming onto a ship, they synthesized it. So it's just one of those things that we have to take for granted. We didn't need to ground up gold anymore. So I guess there's always possibilities.
Correct.
You have a new little boy
in
your household.
Yes. Sadly, Suji, our old gal, passed away in September, 18 and 4 months. And then just because she was so high maintenance, my wife and I, Kemi, were never able to travel, and we ended up booking Japan, New York, LA. And then like a month later, Kemi was like, look at this dog sitting in the Pug Nation of LA, this puggle. Sadly, no eyes. He was like 7 or 8. His eyes were badly infected. He ended up losing his eyes. So we ended up. Where's Sharky? Here, I'll bring him over here. He's you can find him on Instagram at Hey Sharky Hey. Here he is. Oh my gosh, here's our boy.
Oh, hello, Sharky.
He is very much a mama's boy.
Oh, he's so sweet.
And it's kind of funny. He whenever he's out for a walk, even though he can't see, if he hears a woman's voice, he'll always stop and sit beside her. Until she pays attention.
Yeah. Joe, he's so beautiful.
Yes, he's a good boy. Very, very affectionate, especially again with mom.
Thank her for me, please.
He's got the big ears. The big floppy ears.
Sweet.
We did a DNA test because I was really curious to see what he would be.
Yeah.
And we sent away to this place like called Embark. And
that's great.
That's what it's called. Yeah. And we got the results, and it was like 92.5% pug and 7.5% no, they said unresolved. And they're like, maybe it's a Pekingese, maybe it's a Cocker Spaniel. And I was like, I'm very dissatisfied with the service. Usually,
Right.
you want to send out your DNA, you want to know. I don't need guesses. I mean, I could guess. I could say, beagle, maybe, basset hound. Yeah, I don't know.
Wow.
But
You just put him down in front of food and water. Does he know his way around? Does he have a map in his head?
Yeah. He took a week to map
the
place.
Like a Roomba.
He'll always like walk around, knock into things.
Aww.
He still does it. And my wife is always like, oh, when she hears them, she'll be in the other room and she'll hear like kunk, and she'll be like, oh, like it breaks her heart. But he's got a hard little noggin. So
dogs are the best people, man.
They are.
Joe, thank you for celebrating 250 episodes with me. This was great.
My pleasure. Let's do this again in 50 or so episodes.
I'll have you back for sure, brother. You take care of yourself.
Thanks, Dave.
Any Stargate news, we'll have to keep each other in the loop. So,
all right, done.
Be well, sir.
Take care.
Joseph
Bye,
Mallozzi.
everybody.
Thank you. Joseph Mallozzi, writer and executive producer, Stargate SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe. This was a great hour, and I really hope you guys enjoyed. Jacob Olihars, is Beau Bridges on the cards for an interview? I invited Beau a few years ago, and he politely declined. So he's getting up there in age. I don't blame him. There's a chance I could be in LA later this year. If I'm there in person, we could check, see if it's possible, maybe to do something with Christopher Judge, someone that Beau knows. Maybe we could do something. But as for right now, he's declined. When we had Stargate Command, Chris did an interview with Beau and Ben Browder at Beau's house, and I don't think that they've posted it to the YouTube channel, which is a shame because it was a really good episode. One of the stories that Ben shared about Beau in terms of forcing cuts in a shot was taken from that interview, and I asked Ben to retell that for 249 when we had him on last week. But you never know. We may get him, but it's very important to me that especially the older cast come on and have their say if they're willing to provide it. We have a huge list of episodes coming your way for this season on Dial the Gate, if I can get my act together here. Season 3 and 4 AI concept art, or AI art developed by Adam Cahill, is going to be airing tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Gildart Jackson, who played Janice, is going to be joining us for a midweek episode live Wednesday, May the 29th at 12 noon Pacific time. Rainbow Sun Franks is going to be hosting an episode of Stargate Trivia live Saturday, June the 1st. I'm hoping to have, depending on David Hewlett's schedule, him and Kate Hewlett here on June the 2nd. I'll keep that information coming when I have more information. Retro Badger is joining us for another episode of Stargate Ship Battles. We had a whole bunch of Asgard ships going at one another and their enemies. And then Jeff Gulka is going to be joining us on June the 9th for a live playthrough. Jeff Ritu Charlie Gulka of Stargate Timekeepers Episode 1. Armin Shimmerman, NTS and Stargate SG-1, is going to be joining us live Saturday, June the 15th at 12 noon Pacific time. And I'm hoping that we'll have a special guest accompanying me to ask him some questions. This one's really going to be one about getting to know Armin a little bit better. We had such a great time with him talking about Shakespeare and the things that he loves. And he wanted to come back, and it's like, hey, it's Quark. Absolutely we'll sit down for another hour with you. So I was really privileged to have him, consider coming back. And so we're going to do that with him. And then Christina Cox, who played multiple roles in Stargate. She was Takaya. She was Ann Teldy in Whispers. She's going to be joining us live Saturday, June the 22nd at 12 noon Pacific time. We've got a few more in schedule pending as you go further down this list. But if you want to keep an eye on what's going on, do it at dialthegate.com, because we've got a lot of episodes coming your way. I really appreciate everyone who has tuned in to this episode. This was a big deal for me to reach this number. It couldn't have been possible without my moderators, Summer, Tracy, Anthony, Jeremy, and Marcia. You guys are the best. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, click the subscribe icon. It really makes a difference and helps our show grow its audience. Please also consider sharing this episode with a Stargate friend. And if you want to get notified about future episodes, click subscribe. And if you click the bell icon and notify, if you click the bell icon, we will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last minute guest changes, because sometimes they do cancel last minute. And clips from this live streaming will be released over the course of the next few weeks on both the Dial the Gate and GateWorld.net YouTube channels. Once again, we are going to be having an exclusive panel for Stargate's 30th anniversary. It's going to be the Stargate Anniversary 30th fan celebration at San Diego Comic-Con this summer. And more information will be available as soon as we get the word from Comic-Con International to discuss that. So I'm really excited. My tremendous thanks to Joseph Mallozzi. My thanks to Bryce and Eagle SG for my graphics. Matt Wilson, Eagle SG, he did that beautiful shot of Destiny at the start of the episode and is responsible for all of our cool spaceships this season. So I really cannot do the show without these guys. And Frederick Marcoux at Concepts Web, my archivists. 250 did not happen just because of me. It happened because of a huge group of people who helped me pull this show off week in and week out. So thank you so much to my whole team. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gate, and I'll see you on the other side.